All right, guys, soil test results and more part two. Continuing the theme of the island right now. I'm picking up basically from here. And hopefully by the time I'm done with this video, we'll have this whole sheet covered in this segment. Voice is definitely doing much better this go around. So we'll see how long we hold up. No water breaks this time. Okay, so now we approach the more of the living part of your food plot. So I'm about to give some information here I think is very valuable because of this right here. You realize this can actually fluctuate. So what you have actually can go down if you're not careful. So here's what will happen. We want to watch this number right here. You want to keep this below 100. That is basically what is going on up here in this area. So like I said before, the island has a really bad track record with organic matter levels. That's coming in low. The nitrogen output in here is low. The only thing I saw that was good is this. One of my other tests came back at 5.1, which is also fantastic. So we want to push this to as close to 2 or higher. So at least I'm okay in one category, but this output right here is just absolutely horrible. And again, a real quick synopsis. This is your amount of food available for your microbes. So what's going to happen is we have a organic nitrogen rating of 21.3. That is under a multiplication factor. A balanced soil will read anything between 7 to 15. So my number is above 15, which means we are out of balance up here in this area. And you may notice that the island color has changed once again. I've been adding additional fertilizer since I've done the first soil test video, which is a little bit of manganese and sulfur, but I've also added a lot of copper in here and 40 pounds of lime that has magnesium in it. So I'm addressing a few things, even though 40 pounds is not going to solve the problem, but at least it will take some of the bitterness bite out of the soil. So 40 pounds on a quarter acre is the equivalent to 160 pound per acre broadcast rate for that. So there is enough here to at least raise the pH a point, maybe 2. If I can get it to at least 5.5, you're starting to get toward a different category of acidity, which is good. You want to get it closer to 7. All right, so let's get on track here. Organic matter or organic nitrogen and carbon. We want to balance that out. So how in the world are we going to achieve that? This right here is under 100, but we're dangerously close to breaching that percentage. One of the ways that you can do this is through your planting cycle. So I've not been restoring this area near as long as I have the main food plot. And it's going to take cycles of nitrogen building through plants. At least this is how I'm doing it anyway. Now you can add nitrogen fertilizer. You can also add, now I'll be warning of this, if you want to add organic matter, you can use like cow manure and stuff like that. But you don't know what seed output that cow manure has in it. So you may introduce some nasty, nasty weeds you don't want. And that's the reason I'm not going that route. I'm trying to just plant it straight organically, let the plants do the work and build the soil up. So it's not an instant process that occurs. I would say up here by year 5 or 6, you're probably going to see quite a bit of a difference up here, especially since I'm addressing trace minerals. But we have to build up the carbon level, which rye pumps carbon. Every plant I put in here pumps carbon back into the soil. but rye is really, really good at it. It's one of the highest rated carbon producers of my food plot plants. The nitrogen is being built up by some very powerful nitrogen producers. So we still have pockets of good clover that I purposely left in here to help guide this soil into a better state. So I've got pockets scattered throughout here that have good patches of clover in them. We're just basically waiting on the summer blends to fill in. So the clover will produce anywhere from 130 to 150 pounds of nitrogen per acre, especially healthier clover stands. The deer vetch is even stronger than clover. It can go over 200 pounds per acre with healthy deer vetch. So the more powerful plants you pick, the faster this nitrogen rate can build up. Section 4 is a testament to that, and I'll talk about that when we get to that part of the soil test segment. So all of these nitrogen pumpers, the sun hemp, the deer vetch, even cow peas is up here. That is another huge nitrogen pumper, even though it's not large quantity, so it's not going to be what I'm stating here. But there is new research that indicates cow peas may eclipse sun hemp in the nitrogen production category. They have found with the right microbes and bacteria combinations, which I don't know what they are yet, but they claim they've been able to get 300 pounds per acre out of these plants. So I've got some very, very powerful nitrogen pumpers in here. That will definitely help with anything on this side of the sheet. So as I keep planting year after year, this number should go up. But since the nitrogen is so bad in here, I may give it a small amount of help and probably put about, say 15 pounds out. I'm not going to do a lot. I'll just put a little bit out, so that way some of these other plants that don't make nitrogen can at least get a requirement, especially like this buckwheat, which is not, it's not jumping out like my main plot. They're skinnier, they're smaller. It looks like what my plot started off with initially out in, the main plot. Skinny plants, nothing to them, because the nitrogen was so bad. Well, we're experiencing the same thing here. Buckwheat is growing, but it's not on the scale where I really want to see that eruptive growth. So even though sunlight is a problem up here, nutrients is a bigger problem than sunlight. All right, so we want to keep this under 100. And by doing these crop cycles and working on organic matter, anything that is high organic, like rye can produce roots 60 inches or more deep. Sorghums have also some super deep type roots. There is even Sudan grass. I believe it can go 70 or 80 inches deep. So there's different plants that can help you with a lot on this side of the column. Again, I kind of touched on this briefly, but this is what is being released when water is applied to it. Or I'm sorry, this is what they use to with different chemicals to break this out, just to see what's in the soil. This is water release up here. So every time it rains, that's about the numbers I'm getting. So let's move over here to the part that I think more people are interested in. And you should be as well. These are all important anyway. What I intend to do with these is there's so much information here. I'm not going to be able to contain this to just one video or even this video. So we're going to do goals. And I may indicate a few things here of what some of these can do. But when I do the individual videos on these, we're going to go into deeper detail. I'd rather do it that way. So when you see what I'm applying in the plots, you will understand why they are being used. All right, so as food plotters, what is something that we need to do about phosphorus, or what do I need to see in my soil for phosphorus? To be surprisingly honest with you, it doesn't take that much phosphorus to function for most people's food plots. What is considered high is anything above 25 parts per million. Now, that does not mean that you're overloading your soil with phosphorus at 25, 26, or 30. You want it to go more than that. I know this is kind of weird, but their chart is based upon farmers, hay fields, and cattle, horses. You know, this is we're not doing cattle, we're not doing horses. The plants that we set out need more fuel. So the fuel that we're going to add here is phosphorus. This is very important when it comes to growing deer antlers. You need calcium and phosphorus to be in a certain ratio, 2 parts calcium to 1 phosphorus. That is the ideal conditions for growing big deer, and we're nowhere near that. So phosphorus up here is low, and again, this is also being throttled once again by 5.3 pH. So what is really my plant uptake? Instead of 16, it's going to be lower. It's going to function probably, because you're siphoning nutrients through a straw when your pH gets bad, it's probably down to like anywhere from 4 to 7 parts per million. That's just a guess. I'm not saying exactly that's what's happening, but when you have bad pH like this, you are not getting this full benefit. So even though it's available to plants, it's going to take a lot longer to siphon that out of the soil because the pH is off. So as a goal for phosphorus, I would love to see my phosphorus level anywhere from 80 parts per million all the way up into the, now this is personal goals that I have set for myself, but let's say 200 parts per million. You don't want to go too much higher than that, because phosphorus will start moving, and I'm referring to leaching out of your soil. When you get too much phosphorus, that can run off into creeks and streams, and we don't want that phosphorus doing that. That could damage the creeks and streams in there when there's so much phosphorus being shot in there. Usually, depending on how good your soil is, I think 300 or higher parts per million, it starts getting dangerous that you may be leaching some form of phosphorus out of your soil. So for food plotters, I would like to see it in the 80s or better. And now I've got soil testing here that are in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. 60s is great. As a matter of fact, one is setting at 58. You know, you probably will not see a phosphorus shortage in your food plots, even at 58. It's all about the system you run. So every time I tweak this system through different mixes, my requirements will change. So one year, maybe my phosphorus is looking great. Then I add a new plant that requires more energy to grow and more nutrients. And then suddenly the phosphorus may start popping up in little pockets. So it's all about what you put in here. It's what you need. And these guys, along with buckwheat, will help provide the system what it needs. It's amazing how these guys that we can't see know what your crops need. All right, I have my main food plot as far as parts per million on that is anywhere from 4 to nearly 5 times higher than that number. That is the microbes, that is buckwheat and worms working together to raise this number. That's why I brought buckwheat up here in heavy doses to start unlocking not only phosphorus but other minerals in here, because this island needs so much help. All right, so let's move on to potassium. This is another biggie. Each and every one of these at some point can affect your overall protein output, by the way, which is what you want when it comes to growing big deer. They want a lot of protein. You fix these guys up, you're going to be giving it to them, especially on this end, higher end of production for protein and that one as well. All right, try to keep some of these nasty bugs out of my face. Mosquitoes is awful up here. Potassium. All right, so I'm showing 81 parts per million. That is not enough. It's in the marginal category. My personal goal is to see that over 300 parts per million. Now remember, personal goals is mine. So what is a good number for everybody that would work? I would like to see potassium at 200 parts per million to 250 parts per million. I think you all would be extremely satisfied with how your food plots are growing with that much potassium. So obviously we don't have enough in the island. That needs to be raised. I think they said 75 pounds. Hold on a second here. Let me flip this over real quick. Yes, I'm short in phosphorus and potassium. So they recommended 40 pounds of phosphorus and 75 pounds of potassium. So we have to raise those up. I'm going higher than 75. I'm probably going to do probably about 125 up here, and then we'll see where we land. All right, now the next one here is zinc. Zinc can vary quite greatly. There is actually a ratio that you can follow that will help keep some of this balanced. Zinc, for every 10 parts phosphorus, you need to have 1 part zinc. So I have 1.16, which means this number should have been at 1.6. So I don't have enough zinc. Even though the recommendations say I don't need to add zinc, I need to add zinc. Remember, this is food plotting. This is not farming. So I'm going to add more zinc in here. If I'm going to raise my phosphorus up to, let's say, 100, my zinc needs to be at 10. Easy numbers, guys. 100 parts per million, 10 parts zinc. So zinc can vary quite greatly in the requirement range. Another one here is iron. For most cases, that 22.3 parts per million would be enough for most people's food plots. I want my iron above 100 parts per million. I have found iron shortages in my food plots, which tells me that I am not quite at optimal levels. And what is considered optimal? Anything 50 to 100 is considered optimal. Every test I had came back below that number. So I would love to get it to 100 parts per million. Just another personal goal. And I will adjust those goals once I see what the soil health score is and look for ways to maybe creep it up a little bit more. All right, the next biggie here, guys. This is one I've talked about and showed you in many videos, and that is manganese. Last year I brought manganese up here and treated the island with it. Even though I did not cover the whole island, I came back with a 13.3 parts per million rating. I have some information on certain plants on what they are required to run with in order to have sufficient manganese levels. I'll go ahead and tell you, soybean, especially now, the soybean that they're talking about is farmer soybean. The soybean I use is a stronger, more nutrient-sucking plant. But that soybean that they were calling out for manganese was 30 parts per million. That's why I have all those holes in my leaves. Manganese is very important in antler development too. So that's a little clue about manganese. But we definitely have to get this higher than 13.3. So as a food plotter for yourself, what is a good number to be setting at? Well, if the minimum to run a farming soybean is 30, I would love to see my manganese setting at 50 to 100 parts per million. I'm going to shoot for at least 50. I think you all would be, that should take care of a lot of plants. I'm talking 99.999%. I don't think, as a matter of fact, let's just say it's 100%, because I don't think there's a lot of plants that's going to eat up that much. And you're not going to bulk plant, if you're doing variety, the same plant crammed into one area here. So that's why if you do single species food plots, you're destroying certain requirements on certain parts of your test here. So if I planted nothing but soybean up here, I'm going to destroy that number. I mean, it's going to siphon out what it can, because it's already way too low, and it'll get into the single digits. Even though on their scale it says anything above 2 parts per million is considered optimal, it is not when it comes to food plotting. Tests can be tricky, guys, and I think doing extra research really helps our goals. Now, here is the next one, and copper. I have managed to become a copper deficient soil. Copper deficiencies are considered rare. Well, you're looking at a rarity in the property that most people have. I have terrible copper numbers. That is also a common theme that seems to be in this state. I don't think there's enough copper in our soil to help grow better deer. And copper helps greatly with plants too. You don't realize this, but copper is probably one of the hardest shortages that, you know, like visually looking at something, that it is hard for me to figure out it is copper, because it mimics so many other deficiencies. So what'll happen is, you think that you've got a nitrogen shortage or an iron shortage or sulfur shortage, right? Copper helps with the chlorophyll effort in plants. It also assists microbes in nitrogen fixation. I'm not going to go any deeper than that. But when you have copper this low in here, we have some serious issues when it comes to food plotting. I have already addressed the copper output, and real quickly here, because this is so rare, I want to show you what has happened to this chestnut tree. Now, for those of you that's already been in the post section of my channel, where I post the extra content, you're going to see what I'm talking about here with this chestnut tree. I have not done any additional fertilizing to this chestnut tree. Look at how dark green this thing turned after I threw copper out. And now the limbs had started growing again. This tree was suffering from lack of copper. All these trees in here are suffering from lack of copper. You can see the new growth spurt right here. It rapidly shot out about another 4-inch growth spurt right there. It's still going. Even the main limbs and the main trunk, which is going to be this one, is all this right here is growing again. Copper by itself has helped with a major problem with these trees. So it's important that copper levels are at least optimal in your food plots. And changing copper alone can drastically change the look of a food plot. Much like when I treat boron in here, copper has some very powerful properties to it when it comes to food plotting. So let's talk about what we need as food plotters for copper. All right, so according to their scale, 0.2 or higher is optimal. 0.2 in a food plot world is absolutely horrible. I want mine to be at 4 to 5 parts per million. We have to raise this more than 10 times. No, I'm sorry. Why did I say 10? This needs to be, yeah, actually, it's higher. It's just really high. My mind just went blank on calculations. And I've got it calculated at the house. But basically up here, you're going to have to put out nearly 10 pounds per acre copper in here. So I've set out 2.5 pounds, which is equivalent to 10 pounds per acre in a food plot. A lot of concentrated copper went in here. And I'm telling you right now, I can see a difference in every plant in here, and even these oak trees. This will also help assist in nut size as well. So I know I'm talking a little bit more about copper here, but it is so rare and people may not necessarily pay attention to this. But for you guys, if you're at like 1.5 parts per million, maybe you might want to try to go to 4. See what happens, right? I'm in the band of 4 to 5 parts per million. Should be adequate for anything I run up here. However, we have a different beast up here. We have a lot of large trees, and my issue here is waiting to see how much of this copper gets stolen by the trees. So if I'm putting it out at 10 pounds per acre, redo the test, and it comes back at 1.5 parts per million, I'm going to have to put a lot more copper in here, because that means then the trees robbed it of the food plot plants. So this food plot is an anomaly because of the sheer volume of trees in here. So every tree that is removed drastically changes the outcome of the plot. That's why I'm waiting. Soon as I'm given permission to even take one tree out of here, it's coming down. I mean, every tree I can remove is going to help. All right, so let's move on from copper. All right, sulfur. Now this says sulfate, which is what I've talked about in my fertilizer video. Sulfate, not sulfur, sulfate. That is what the bacteria can work with to transfer to plants. That's what's available to them. 16.3. That is quite a bit. That's probably quite a bit higher than some of the food plotters I've seen on YouTube. In most cases, what would be a good number for your sulfate to be at? I would like to see it at 40 parts per million. I think that's a good goal to strive for. My personal goal is anywhere from 40 to 60. And the sulfate really helps with protein and green level of plants and several other things. For those of you that are into grains, and you'll get much bigger corn plants, much bigger milo. Screen walls will react much better. You need to get this up and this up to help with that. All right, let's talk about calcium. Calcium, well, there's one less mosquito. Calcium in here is dangerously low. I've already put 500 pounds of calcium out before I did this test. 1 year before I did this test. And with 500 pounds, I still come back with that number. That is absolutely horrendous calcium numbers. With 500 pounds, that number should have been well over 500 or 600 easily. That means the trees probably absorbed a lot of that calcium, because it's so low up here that there was practically no calcium left in the upper parts of this soil. I couldn't tell you what it looks like once you get below 8 inches, but the readings I took here, calcium is dangerously low. There's going to be a lot of leaf deformities here. It's also going to affect taste, rate of growth, strength of plants. You know, I've been seeing plants, you know, like I talked about in Island Deception, how the rye was falling over on itself in the previous year and it didn't do it so much this year. Calcium is a big driver in strength of plants. It also has a lot to do with bucks' antlers. We need a lot of calcium to service giant deer. The bigger those deer are getting, the more it takes for them to sustain that larger size. Well, this island ain't cutting it. It is not cutting it by a long shot. So for those of us that are looking at calcium, what should that be at parts per million? Because I'm about to show you how bad this is. The parts per million should be at 2,500 or higher. 10 times the amount I'm showing here. And because my goals of pH, they recommended I put out 3,200 pounds of lime per acre up here, and that's to get it to 6.5. So if my goal is 6, 8 to 7, we're going to have to put more than that out. Most likely, I'm going to, for this quarter acre, it is very highly likely you're going to see me put 1,000 pounds of lime up here. I mean, it's very likely that's going to happen. And I think that would get me to where I need to be. And who knows, I still may need to add an additional 100 to 200 pounds after that. But I'm trying to get it to 6, 8 to 7. And based on what I think I need to do that, that is my educated guess, is 1,000 pounds, even though their rate suggests that I put 900 in a quarter acre. So we're going to shoot for 1,000. So we'll see what happens with this island, because it desperately needs more lime. And the fact that I put 500 pounds out up here previously, and it didn't hardly do a dent in that number, that makes me nervous. I mean, how much are these trees stealing? So 1,000 pounds may not even be enough when it's all said and done. That's why this food plot is going to be one of the harder ones to fix up, because there's so many variables in here that will affect your outcome whether you like it or not. So we've established that that is bad. So for those of you that have horrible calcium readings, that definitely needs to be a lot higher. Strive for 2,500 or more. I would like, my personal goal, I would like to see that at 2,700 range or 2,750 range. And that should help me out quite a bit here. Magnesium. Here's another one, guys. Another one that scored horribly low on my soil test. Magnesium is a big helper with nervous systems of deer and other things, especially in, this helps really strengthen plants. Magnesium often shows as a red color or even yellowing in your plants when it's not right. Well, obviously up here we are nowhere near right. I would like to see my magnesium over 400 parts per million. I think for all of us it would need to be above 300. I think you would be thoroughly thrilled with 300 parts per million. And remember, if you're doing this bacteria injection with the microbes, they can continue to help with these numbers and inch them up slowly over time, especially if your food plot is not devouring your reserves up. Remember, once you reach a balanced soil, that recycling of nutrients keeps happening. So you should see a steady flow or a steady number on your soil test year after year. In some cases, you might see it creep up or down depending on how much rain you get, how, if you keep the soil covered, that's a biggie right there. So that'll help keep flushing out, or not preventing the flushing out of nutrients is what I really mean. Sodium, we're not too worried about. That came back at 9, which is fine by me. We don't want that skyrocketing into the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Sodium, as long as it's there, I'm good with that, because it really doesn't change a lot with plants. So that is what's given me my soil health calculation number, which has come back pretty bad. But here is their suggestion to fix that. So 60% legume plant rate up here and 40% grass. That's farmland when they when they suggest this. I'm not doing grass up here, period. So what have I done up here? It's higher than 60% lagoon. You've got loads of deer vetch in here. You've also got cowpeas in here at small quantities, soybeans up here, clovers in here. I mean, this is going to be more like 80% legume and 20% like milo, okra, you know, the other plants that are not nitrogen pumpers, the buckwheat. Buckwheat will grow fast, seed out fast, fade away. And hopefully by then the plot will establish itself, take over, or I get another round of buckwheat growing, which is fine as well. I don't care, that's fine. A new wave will be perfect up here. So there's all kinds of problems with this island. Now, I want to talk about this. I briefly touched on this, and I didn't go into really deep detail here. So this aggregate, water stable aggregates, the higher this number, the better. When 100, you can't get higher than 100%. This is how your soil is structured and how well you're taking care of your plots. So for those of us that are in clay soil, you want to see this number get above 50, 60, 70% range. All right, so that has not scored too bad, but it's still, as far as my standards go, that's not good enough. My other soil test score, hold on one second here. I want you to look at this real quick. So there's the island aggregate score, which has to do with root favorability, how well the soil holds up. You know, I talked about that crusting over the clay. The lower that number, the more that the clay can crust over. This also has to do with leaching of nutrients. The higher it goes, the more it holds them in place. Look at that one. That to me is world class. And because I'm tilling, I can't tell you how come I did that well. I actually have no explanation on how I scored so high on water soluble aggregates. That is world class soil structure. Tilling destroys it, but yet I came back with a world class rating. So there's you a mystery to figure out. All right, so the island itself has many challenges ahead of it. Now you can see why I talked about soil deception. When you saw how tall the rye is growing, you're thinking yourself, it's already in good shape. We got so many nutrients up here. Yet, I went down this list and every one of these needs to be higher. There's not a single one here that I would say is, oh, well, we'll just ignore this one. Don't worry about the sodium. But there's nothing here I said I need to back off. Everything here is bad, trace minerals included. There is no boron on this, but boron is the worst at staying in soil, but organic matter levels will help with boron levels over time. Now, here's another thing. Real quick before I end the video, there's reasons your organic matter can drop. There's also reasons this score can drop. And how do we raise this score too, by the way? We'll add that in there as well. It all has to do with this number right here. Remember, if I told you you go above 100, you've got microbes looking for another form of food. So what is the next form of food? The glues that hold your soil together and organic matter. Your microbes will start devouring that if they're not fed enough. And I have one test that came back showing that that is a problem. So we need more organic matter. This score will rise when the soil itself starts giving more food for microbes, because we're getting dangerously close to losing one of these numbers up here. So we have to be careful that we make sure we supply more organic matter to keep these microbes happy, especially nitrogen. That will help them as well. But that number right there can drop off, which means your microbes are devouring how your soil is held together. Crazy, ain't it? So how do we raise that? Well, first off, you want to do the least soil disturbance as possible. I've seen a lot of no-till people, this is all YouTube related, that have come back with soil in the 70, 80, near 90% range in no-till, yet I managed that with till. So don't say that tilling is better than no-till. I think it's just because I've shallowed up so much in my tilling, not allowing it to dig deep, that has raised my score so high. So when I've dumped fertilizer in the main food plot, it's not going anywhere. I'm not losing it, period. Up here, we can have leaching of nutrients. So that's why you want to have those aggregate scores really good. The more you have better practices, the better that number gets. And they can tell you how well you've been doing just by that score alone. And 64 is considered pretty good. So I've got, out of all these things in the island, what was the best score I could get? That. Soluble salts. That scored the highest as far as helping my plants. Everything else in here is off the mark. And some of this is off big time. So, for instance, I want to raise my zinc. Since I know I'm raising my phosphorus, I'd like to see my zinc somewhere around 7 to 8 parts per million. Keeping in line with the 1 to 10 when I add phosphorus up here. So, again, guys, this is all dependent on what you run. If you do single species planting, you'll have different results than me because I do multiple species. But we have to, if you're wanting to do nature's way of growing it without use of chemicals that we don't know what side effects is going on, and you would rather go the multiple species route. All right, guys, so I hope this video helps you. Not one drink break this time. No hoarse voice. We made it. So this completes the assessment of the island, and I would give this, if I was a food plotter, my own personal score, a D. Rated it from A being the best, F failing, I would give this place a D. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. There's definitely more to come. Hang tight.